Hello everybody, it's Sarah, and I am sorry if I speak kind of more softly in this video, maybe sound a bit weird or whatever, because I currently have tonsillitis actually. However, I am feeling somewhat good again because of antibiotics, except for a terrible headache, but I'm sitting at home because obviously I'm not gonna go into work and I'm bored. So let's do my February wrap up, because that will be at least an hour of entertainment for me because I actually read quite a lot. I hope I will get through my wrap up all in once. If not, I'll just split it up into multiple parts over the day, but you'll see it as one video. Anyway, actually, before I get into my wrap-up, I realized shortly after filming my January wrap-up that I actually forgot one of the books on my January wrap-up to talk about that, because I had at that point already lent it to a friend of mine, so it was no longer on my TBR card. What did I read this month level on my TBR card. And the book that I'm talking about is Angels Before Men by Raphael Nicolas, which is a retelling of, I think Genesis is like the part of the Bible that deals with the creation of the world, right? It's a retelling of the Bible basically, and it follows the creation of Lucifer as he's created as an angel, as he learns about angels, about the world, and as he starts kind of exploring past the borders that are set for him and for other angels by gods. And it's also an incredibly queer story. I highly enjoyed the book. I think I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. I love the writing. Like on Goodreads, there are some reviews that say that it's overwritten. I do not agree with that. However, something that I do think is the case with the book and with this writing is that this writing will not be for everyone, because it is intensely flowery, intensely symbolic imagery. Like it's beautiful. It's beautiful but incredibly purple prosy. So I would say if you can get like an example chapter or so, a reading, what's it called? I forgot what it's called. You know, when you can sometimes get the first 2 chapters or something of a book to see if you might like it. If you can get that for this book, I would do that just to see if the writing is actually your style. Otherwise, I can highly recommend this book. Also be aware that there were a lot of reviews that said that nothing is happening in the book, which is absolutely not the case. There's just not that much like action type plot happening, but there's incredibly much happening internally with Lucifer and with his development throughout the story, with his arc, with his rise among the angels, and then also with his fall. I found it gorgeous, amazing, beautiful. There's one thing why I gave it like half a star less, but that was really just a personal thing. But aside from that, really loved it. Loved how the story like explored religious trauma through a religious story, and it was amazing, and I can highly recommend it, obviously since it's already with a friend. But yeah, now let's move on to my February books. In February, I read a total of 11 books, and I also DNF'd 1. In terms of the moods, we have adventurous, emotional, tense, dark, reflective, mysterious, informative, and challenging, so really my typical moods. About, no, more than 2/3, like 60, well, a bit less than 2/3 actually. About 64% of the books that I read were deemed as medium paced. Then I have 18% that were deemed by Storygraph as fast paced and 18% as slow paced. 27% of the books that I read were under 300 pages, 27 over 300 pages, between 300 and 500 to be exact, and then 45% over 500 pages. So I read a lot of chunkers this month. Then 10 books that I read this month were fiction, and I read one non-fiction. Genre, I had fantasy, science fiction, horror, dystopian, LGBTQIA, romance, history, and historical. 7 of the books I read were in print format, then 2 books were digital, and 2 books I read as audio. I'm not gonna go through every single rating, but I don't know if you can see this, but I have an absolutely beautiful rating this month. I had exactly 1 book of each rating this month, so 1 2.5 star, 1 3.0 star, and then 1 book from 3.5 star to 5 star, so with 25% or 0.25 star increments. So yeah, that was pretty fun. And then in terms of my diversity stuff that I read, also I think I forgot to mention it, I had 1 reread this month, and then the rest were new to me. And then in terms of my like diversity stats, actually, because February is always Black History Month in America, but also in Austria, I tried to read a lot of Black authors, but in general with authors of color I did really good this month. I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 books that I read this month out of the 11 be by BIPOC authors. And then at least 3 more books had major characters that were also BIPOC. In terms of queerness, where was I? Queerness, I wasn't doing that well, but I had 1, 2, 3, I think, just... Oh wait, actually I didn't do 6, I had 7 books this month written by BIPOC authors. I only had 3 books this month that had queer characters in it, apparently. I don't know, maybe I had more. We'll see once I go through all the books. I'm actually realizing that I logged some books as physical copies when I actually read them digitally, so I'm kind of confused right now about all the other stuff, basically. And then I had, I think, like 1, 2, 3 at least. Yeah, I think 3 books with disability and mental health rep. I think that's the somewhat accurate numbers. Maybe 1 more or 1 less. Well, actually not less, but maybe 1 or 2 books more for each of the categories. But yeah, now that I've already rambled on enough, let's get into talking about the books. And of course I will start with the nonfiction, which I would usually start with if I ever had nonfiction, which I usually don't. But I finally finished Silk Roads by Peter Frankopan, which has the undertitle of A New History of the World, which I don't like that subtitle because I think it gives a wrong picture of what this book is about, because it's not a world history. I mean, generally speaking, it's kind of hard to create a book that is a world history because of how much there has happened. But for me, something that a book that is a world history does have to do is include all continents, which this book very much does not. It completely leaves Africa as well as South America to the side, which is fine, because what this book is in its center is it's a history of the relationship of the West with the East, so the Middle East as well as Eastern Asia. I would have, because I felt like that was how this book was marketed. This book was marketed as a new perspective on this history, on the relationship between the Middle East and the West. So that was kind of what I was going in for history that was maybe a little bit less Western-centric, that was more Asian history heavy, the perspective of Asian history heavy. I felt like this book didn't give that at all. It was still all about the West and all about what this relationship was between the East and the West, which is fine for me. I still found the book to be very interesting. I just thought that it was marketed very wrong. But overall, I found it very interesting. I found especially like the ancient history part interesting, and then also the more modern part. So when America also comes into play a lot more, obviously. So the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century. So yeah, and then everything in between. I have to be honest, I listened to it on audio, so I listened to it 2.5 speed sometimes, so I didn't always listen too closely, but I still found it interesting. Just be aware of what this book actually is when you go into it. And by the way, just as an info, I didn't end up rating this book because I'm having kind of a hard time usually rating nonfiction. So next reread, just very quickly, I got started on my reread of the Stormlight Archive. I am of course doing a reread together with Scylla from Scylla's Pocats, as well as Steph from Coffee Over Apples, and we are rereading the Stormlight Archive to prepare for the 5th book coming out at the end of the year, which the 5th book will probably be my last Sanderson book that I will ever read. And we all do not necessarily like Sanderson anymore. I've shat on Sanderson a lot over the past 2 years, almost as much as I praised him before that. And so obviously I tapped this book a lot. I don't know if you can see it. The blue tabs are the ones where it's like, technically, I still like those scenes and I like those aspects of the book. The rest, if you want to know what my tabs are before exactly, so blue is, I actually like this. Then I have Cosmere shit, which usually is Cosmere stuff that I want to see if that ever gets explained anywhere but in Word of Brandon. Not How Oppression Works, also known as generally, this is systemic shit, not personal problems, or what the fuck in the colonialism. So all of that stuff is yellow. Green is just, this is sus, which I also have plenty in here. Orange is stupid character stuff, which is usually when characters act differently than they are set up. Light pink is other annotations, and dark pink is bad world building, because I don't think Brandon is a good world builder. I will not talk anymore about this book in this wrap up because I have enough to talk about, but I will probably film a video this month either on the gender aspect and how that's fucked up in Brandon Sanderson, or how Brandon Sanderson actually is not a good world builder. I will have one video planned for each of the books, but yeah, I still need to think about which of those two I will do for book 1. And now my battery is blinking, so I need to change that. So now we move on to the books that I read for the first time this month. Not gonna lie, February for some reason to me felt awfully long, and I feel like I've already forgotten most of these books. But yeah, first, my least rated book for this month, which I ended up giving 2.5 stars, which I'm kind of sad about because I was really excited about it, was The Principle of Moments by Esme Chikemi Pearson. This was, or the book that I have is the Illumicrate edition. It was the Illumicrate book for December. It's really pretty. This is science fiction, technically, and we follow 2 different characters. One of those characters is, or lives in 6066, in like this new galaxy some years after this emperor took over the world basically, and she lives in like a working colony type thing. However, one day there's a stranger appearing at her door, and after he makes her mom vanish, he tells her that he has, or that she has a sister that she didn't know anything about, whom she has to save. And then the second character we have is a time traveler who starts in 1812, I believe. Yeah, 1812. And he is like in love with the Crown Prince of England, and he wants to stay with him forever. However, he accidentally time jumps to our other character, and then has to help her first because he has an illness that makes time jumping for him very dangerous, so he has to kind of remedy that before he can jump back in time to his, I wanted to say lady love, lord love. So yeah, and then there's also prophecies in between there. I think the reason why I didn't like this is because this just felt very rough draft to me. It's very interesting actually, because I buddy read a lot of books with Scylla, and we buddy read this book and also the next book that I'll talk about. And she really enjoyed both books. I really didn't. It's generally a thing, because it's really funny, because if I love a book, she will generally also love it. If she loves a book, depending on why she loves the book, I might actually give it a really low rating, because we have found out that she has a very much easier time getting attached to characters than me, and I have a very hard time getting attached to characters, because I am mostly a world building and the surrounding, you know, motivations, not necessarily plot, but bigger world, magic, etc. reader. And so if I can't make sense of what the bigger picture is, I have a harder time getting attached to the characters themselves, because I have a harder time following the motivations. And that was kind of what happened to me with this one. I have a similar criticism of this book as I also had of To Cage a God last month, where it just feels like there's this tyrant that is there to be this big overarching enemy, but we're not really exploring what this existence of this tyrant means for the broader world or for the broader spectrum. And because we're thrown into the story so quickly and we don't really set up the characters, I have a harder time getting attached to the characters, caring about the characters, understanding why they're now doing what they're doing. I really need like sometimes to spend sometimes a lot of times with the characters before I fully get them. Like, I like the inciting incident to not be in the first or second chapter. Yeah, that was kind of the thing. And then there was also this prophecy, like the way the prophecy was done in this book. Just like chosen ones and prophecies for me are kind of a hit or miss generally, and I don't necessarily like them if there's not a lot of subversion within those tropes, which I felt like in this book they were done pretty straightforward. And so I just was a little bit like, I don't know how much of a fan I am of that. And so yeah, I ended up giving the book 2.5 stars. I will not be doing a full review of this. I have decided that unless I really have like a hate review, I might be cutting back on the reviews that I do. So yeah, I do still think that there's a readership for that out there. Like, Scylla is very much proof. I forgot how many stars she gave the book, but for me personally, this book just wasn't my preference. And the same thing can also be said for the next book, which interestingly enough is also an Illumicrate book. I don't know, I don't have luck with the Illumicrate books that I've read recently, like except for The Witch King and study in drowning, and I also was fine with God Killer, but Principle of Moments, then last year The Sun and the Void, and now this one as well, was just, yeah. This is the Chassed Air by Sarah Hashem, which is the first book in the Scorching Throne series. I forgot what this, there, The Order of Legends is what this series is called. I ended up giving it 3 stars. To be honest, I was very much torn between 2.75 stars and 3 stars. The reason why I did end up giving this 3 stars is because overall I really ended up enjoying the last few chapters. So yeah, but what is this book about? This is set in this like Egyptian inspired or like Swana inspired world, where you have our main character who goes by Sylvia, and Sylvia is someone called the Chassed Air, meaning she is the heir of, or used to be the heir of, the kingdom called Chassed. However, 10 years ago at this summit that is now known as the Blood Summit, her home kingdom was invaded, her grandparents were killed, and the entire kingdom was taken over. And so now Chassadis are being hunted and killed because they are the only magic users left in the world. And she has just, yeah, she has just like lived for the past 10 years. The first 5 years she has spent kind of almost as a prisoner of a Chassadi who has tried to train her in magic. However, she can't use magic because she has like cuffs that like keep her magic inside of her. And after she escaped from this Chassadi, she has stayed hidden in this little village. However, things seem to be changing when the Nikal heir, who is the heir of the kingdom that kind of led the charge against Chassad, comes to this village, discovers that she's a Chassadi, and decides that she will represent or be the champion for Nikal in this big competition that is happening every I don't know how many years, that is done in honor of the ancestors of the different countries of this region. She accepts to be his champion, which, you know, not really that many options. And the reason why he wants her as a champion is because he wants her to help him like kind of bait some Chassadi rebellion groups. So, first of all, some criticism that I've seen of this book is that it's colonial romance, which it is not. I can see where it comes from, especially in the first third to half of the book. It very much seems like that. However, the situation between Chassed and the surrounding countries is a lot more complicated than colonialism. However, we're not really given very much information. The way I would say it is the situation seems like it's somewhat similar to the complicated relationships between the different factions in the Daevabad trilogy. However, I found it way better done in the Daevabad trilogy, because my main criticism for this one is that we're never really given enough information on the world building, on the history, on everything. And the reason why it seems why we're not given enough information so that we don't understand what's currently going on is because of some big setup that needs to happen for the future and some big twist, which doesn't end up being a twist because you already know there's some big reveal coming, basically. And that was also the main reason why I just didn't end up enjoying the book and why I just didn't end up enjoying the characters. I also didn't really feel attached to the romance between our two main characters, so Sylvia and Aaron. I thought it was kind of out of nowhere. I didn't understand where the sudden attraction of Sylvia on the, towards Aaron came from. So yeah, that's the main thing. Also, the world felt incredibly small. Like they were traveling from one country to the next, and it was like within 2 days or something. And it just, yeah, there was once again, it just felt like there should have been more work going into this book. The reason why I ended up not enjoying both of these books that much is pretty much the same. It's something I actually complained to Scylla, or about this to Scylla, because it just seems that recently my bar for when I can just be along for the ride has raised itself. I used to be able to read these books and to just enjoy them because I was just along for the ride. I could just enjoy the characters, but I now need a lot more to just simply enjoy a book. However, I did really love, as I said, the last 2 chapters, so I ended up giving this 3 stars anyway. It bumped it up to the 3-star, and pretty much the last 2 chapters are the one reason why I do want to continue on with the series. I probably wouldn't otherwise, not gonna lie. So yeah, that's for this book. Next one I have is my 3.5-star read, and that was Ring Shout by P. J. Clark, which is a horror novella, and it follows this person who I forgot the name of, who basically is out killing clan members, except clan members are also, like, they aren't just the metaphorical monsters that they are, but in this story they are also literal monsters. I really enjoyed the book. Like, I enjoyed the story, I enjoyed the book. I just think that I would probably have benefited from reading this audibly, because when I read this, I was just having to do a lot for uni and for other stuff. And this book is written very much in AAVE, which I both enjoyed, but it also made reading it very hard for me. I would compare it to reading a classic, kind of, because classics often have this very specific language to them where you can't just read them, you know, you kind of have to do a bit of translation work, and you have to read them a lot more actively to understand it, because obviously I am not someone who is surrounded by AAVE as someone living in Austria, and so it's not a type of dialect that I am very used to, and so reading this book I had to read it very actively, so that took some of the enjoyment out of it for me at that particular moment when I read it, because I had a lot of work to do for uni and I mostly just wanted to read for my enjoyment. However, in terms of just the simple story, I really liked it. I found it very interesting. And yeah, there's not that much to say because it's a novella, but I would highly recommend it. But yeah, I just have learned that I think a lot of times when books are written in a dialect that I'm like, maybe it's not just that. I think, because I'll get to that later also with another book that I read, I think it's just in general that my inner voice just doesn't fit the book to a degree where it just takes away from the reading experience for me. So if I read those types of books as audio, obviously I am listening to someone else and it's not my inner voice reading, so I think maybe I should go more for that in the future. My 3.75-star read was another novella, and that was The Butcher of the Forest by Primi Mohamed, which I had as an e-arc. This is the story of a woman who is the only woman who has ever gone into this one enchanted forest and come out again. And because of that, she is tasked by the tyrant of where she lives to bring his children to safety again, because the night before they have wandered into this forest. And it's her trying to save those children. This is just a very, like, not that much to say about it. I enjoyed the writing, but it's very much the type of story that I love, kind of modern fairy tale, a lot of elements there. A story that really lends itself to being a novella, because you don't need that many infos, you don't need that much world building. It's just very straightforward modern fairy tale symbolism, like working with archetypes, etc. And so yeah, I really enjoyed that. Then I am now caught up again because the new book came out in November with the Anita Blake Vampire Hunter series. I read the 30th entry in that series with Slay. The series is by Laurel K. Hamilton. The series overall follows Anita Blake, who is a vampire executioner. Vampires have been or become legal a few years ago from the beginning of the series, and so there's now like people who used to be just vampire executioners and just, you know, monster hunters have now become legal, or some of them, and Anita Blake is one of those people. And so she has a lot to do with the vampires, a lot to do with the monsters, and over the course of the series she becomes more and more embroiled with the monsters, and she falls in love with a few of them. She becomes polyamorous sometime in between. There's just like, there ends up being just a whole lot of fucking and not a lot of anything else. This book, interestingly, I think it was almost 500 pages or something, and there was not a single like full-on sex scene, which I am not used to anymore from Anita Blake. But overall, I actually ended up really enjoying this entry. This is kind of my type of mindless story that I can read, and I can read this because I've read it for the past 15 years almost now. Yeah, I think it's actually 15 years. I think I read the first book with 13, 14. So yeah, I just really enjoyed it. And we're now getting close to a wedding. For the past 5 books, we've now gotten close to a wedding, so yeah. Also, there was just some really interesting things, because Laurel K. Hamilton has had issues in the past with Anita Blake very much not being a girl's girl, and there being some, or a lot of internalized misogyny within Anita Blake, especially to certain types of female characters. And one of the characters that has always gotten a lot of hate by Anita Blake was her stepmom and her stepsister, and we finally met her in this like entry, and they are not as bad. So yeah, I'm actually quite surprised. Also, the biphobia is turned down a lot by now. Next we have Nama's Kiss by Jacqueline Carey. This is the 3rd of the series within the Kushiel's Legacy universe, and we finally follow a new character, like a character I think like 2 or 3 generations removed from the characters in the first 2 series. So I could talk a bit more about it. We also follow a character now not from Terre d'Ange, which still is the country that the story centers on, but from Alba, and we follow a character who is the daughter of like one of the folk who kind of are the villains in the 2nd book in the 2nd series, as well as a priest of Nama, so the goddess of love. And when Moirin, our main character, kind of does the ceremony to become an adult within her own culture, the bear goddess, who is central to her culture, sends her away because she has to look for her fate, and her fate is not found in Alba. And so she first travels to the city of Elua, the main city of Terre d'Ange, and tries to see what she can find there, tries to reconnect with her father, to find her father, reconnect with her father. And then also she continues on to Chi'in, which in this world is kind of the pendant to China, because this world building very much is our world but fantasy. So Alba is Great Britain, Terre d'Ange is France basically, and Chi'in is China. And so yeah, first of all, so gay. Oh my god, oh my god. I mean, you know, the first 2 series were already gay. Like, we always have canonically bisexual characters in all of those series, but in this one, chef's kiss. So good. The queerness, so good. I found Moirin as a main character also incredibly interesting. Like, I love how different Jacqueline Carey makes the voices and makes all of her main characters, and how their objectives and what they want to do incredibly different. Then in terms of Ji-in, I had some concerns in terms of Orientalism, because that was always one of my main gripes with Jacqueline Carey. Jacqueline Carey is not necessarily always the best in portraying non-European fantasy ethnicities, and especially when it came to Middle Eastern cultures, there was always a lot of, you know, savagery and Orientalism there. So yeah, so I was very weary going into this book because I knew we were going in the direction of China or Ji-in. However, I do have to admit that it was better than I expected. There's not incredibly much I can say still, because I am not necessarily the best read when it comes to tropes about China in the West. So you might want to go to some Own Voices reviewers for those perspectives. However, I wasn't like overtly terribly offended. That's what I would say generally. And yeah, overall, I just really, again, love our main character. I love the queerness in this, and I am very excited to see where we're gonna go in the next 2 books. Although there, I'm still very nervous, because I think at least in the 3rd book, we're gonna go to North America. And since the countries in this world aren't colonialist in the way they are in the real world, I'm very weary so far. My 4.5 star read was The Truth of the Aleke, which was the 2nd book in the Forever Desert by Moses Oza Utomi, which is another novella. The Lies of the Achungo was, of course, one of my favorite books, if not my favorite book of 2023, so I was very excited when I got an arc for this. I, once again, really highly enjoyed it. There's, like, not that much I can say about the contents of the story. It's just set in this world where you have those different cities, and it's a lot about lies, truth, propaganda, the taking of power, who holds the power, of blind belief, of being betrayed by your city, by your country, by everyone. It's like there's a lot there, and it's very like parable-like in the way the stories are told. I, once again, as I said, really enjoyed it. The reason I think why I gave this a bit less is because I enjoyed the 1st book more, and the 1st book also got me on a really emotional level, whereas this one I mostly really enjoyed on an intellectual level. And yeah, there's not that much to say. Once again, it's a novella. I can highly enjoy the highly recommend the Forever Desert. Why can't I say desert today? Desert as a whole, and yeah, I think you should check it out. So, 2 more books. First is my 4.75 star read, which is Wom City by Toto Tsamase. This one is my read around the world book for February, also because the author is from Botswana. And this is a book of Afrofuturism. It's also the book that won the poll for the buddy read for March for my book club, which is of Queens, Witches and Valkyries. I can't even remember my book club anymore. And it's all about reading high fantasy or fantasy and sometimes also science fiction by women and genderqueer folks. And I just wanted everyone to read this book. This book also absolute travesty. I do not understand why. It has like 3.29 stars average on Goodreads, I think, so a really low average star rating, and I don't get why. This book is also the second book that I mentioned with Ring Shout earlier, where I think audio is just really beneficial sometimes, because I did read this as audio and I think I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much if I had read it physically. I absolutely adored this book as audio. I originally started it as audio because my physical copy hadn't come in yet, and then I thought about switching to physical because usually I enjoy reading physically more than audibly. However, I just, you know, I even just started a chapter and I was like, no, I need to do the audio because the narrator did such a great job, and also I found it really interesting because like most of the book, most of the narration is like in this very nondescript, mostly Americanish, I think, accent. However, when there's dialogue, there's very much, I would assume, Botswanan accents. So yeah, it was really interesting. What is this about? This is set in this futuristic world where, first of all, there's body hopping. So people don't just live one lifespan, but they live multiple lifespans in different bodies. Additionally to that, within Botswana, there is a system where criminals can now be discovered before they do criminal acts, especially if they have been microchipped. So criminal bodies, the minds are taken from those bodies, the body is microchipped, and then those bodies are constantly under surveillance and they will be caught before they commit an act, basically, and the person inside will be incarcerated in like this virtual prison, basically. Our main character, whose name Nolla, that was it. Our main character, Nolla, is such a person who has already had multiple bodies, and her most recent body was a criminal body that is microchipped. And so she lives with this daily. She has to do daily checkups with her husband, who is like a criminal inspector or something, criminal ministry or whatever. And she's not very happy. She has had multiple miscarriages, so I would be careful with that if that's a trigger for you. She has had multiple miscarriages and now she's been told that she's infertile. However, they can do basically IVF outside of her body. And so things are somewhat looking up. However, she's still not happy, and so when one day she's out with the guy that she's having an affair with, she's out like on a fun cruise with their car and they hit a woman, and her microchip doesn't stop her, the car doesn't stop before they hit the woman. Two things that should have happened. And so it's like, fuck, what do we do? If, like, we are ruined if this is discovered. And so they bury the body and she has to get through these microchip checkups, as well as then the like ghost of the woman that they killed comes back seeking vengeance. So there's also some horror elements there. That was a very long explanation for what this book is about. But yeah, there were so many interesting elements, so many interesting discussions with like the microchips and the body hopping, and how there's still bodies that are treated as preferential, and still like souls, I guess, identities that are treated as preferential. The like surveillance of women's bodies, like so many things in this book that I really enjoyed. I enjoyed Nolla as a character. She's not a likable character. She's in a way very egotistical. However, I found her still really interesting, and the main reason why I ended up giving it 4.75 stars is because I was absolutely sure up until like the last two chapters that I would give it 5 stars. However, the ending for me was a bit too abrupt. So that took away just a tiny smidge of the enjoyment. But I will have a full review of this up hopefully soon, so I'll talk more about my thoughts on this book then. And then my 5-star book that I had was Speaking Bones by Ken Liu, which is the 4th book in the Dandelion Dynasty. Since the first book of the Dandelion Dynasty, I have told you there will be one 5-star book in this series for me. And every single book so far wasn't it, but now Speaking Bones is finally my 5-star book in this series. This series is a series that spans generations. It spans cultures. It starts with the rebellion of 2 very different people against this empire, and it ends with the defense of this new empire that has been started. And there's so much there, so much to the characters. I adore Ken Liu's writing. Ken Liu, like, I cannot remember a lot of the plot of the first 3 books, to be honest. I need to at some point find the time to read all 4 books back to back. But like, I still somewhat want to film a review for this series because, like, the attention to detail, there's so much philosophy in there. The kind of almost random chapters you get in between that still give you so much insight on the world, on the characters, on everything. Something that so many authors forget to do nowadays or aren't allowed to do by their publishers. Like, all of these books, if you took out all the 30 to 60 page chapters that are basically just explaining philosophy and like the thoughts of philosophers in this world, which are mostly based on like Chinese philosophers, to be honest, but if you took all of that out, you could probably still have an epic fantasy series that would make enough fans happy enough, but it wouldn't be Ken Liu. And I'm so happy that whoever his editor, publisher, agent is, let him just write 4,000 page chonkers and just put all the stuff in there. The inventions that are made, where you just have like, they start inventing things and you're like, ooh, they're inventing this right now, which by the way is really fun because I work at a museum for science and technology, so like we have most of these inventions in our museum, or I know the stories behind those inventions, which are then kind of, you know, replicated loosely in the story. Like in this one, there's a story in the I think it was during the Cold War, where the Americans tried to get pigeons to like sit in rockets and steer rockets. Like they tried to condition pigeons to steer rockets, which didn't end up working, and the story is in here as well, and it's so epic, it's so funny. But also the heartbreak. Thera as a character, I think there are so few characters that have gone through as much shit as Thera has. Chia as a female main character, also absolutely crazy. It's funny because like in the first book, my main criticism of the first book was that there wasn't really any or that many female characters, and most of the female characters, like one of the only female characters that was in the book, died in an absolutely horrible way, like with a lot of agency, but in a horrible way. Now I can say that this series has some of the most interesting female characters that I have ever read, and all such different characters. And then the last, like, I read the last 400 pages in a day. It took me, for the last 50-ish pages, it took me about as long as for the 200 pages before that, because I was crying so much that I constantly had to stop and just wipe my eyes. It's just, it's a beautiful book. It's a beautiful story. I can highly recommend anyone who loves fantasy to read this series. And yeah, that was it for... I forgot actually to talk about the DNF, but I don't really want to talk about the DNF. DNF I had was Neferura by I forgot who, which I didn't like, and there was some weird shit in there that I also didn't like, so yeah, I will leave it at that. But a thing that I constantly forgot is I, of course, now in my wrap-ups to my series TBR chart, as well as, actually this is my series TBR chart now, as well as my next country for my Read the World. I do not have all the countries in here yet, but we're just gonna contend with these ones. I think I have up to E in here right now. So this will not be for March, this will be for April. And the country for April will be Azerbaijan. We'll see if I can find a book for that. And then for my series TBR chart, I did not read or continue the series that I picked for February because I actually decided to DNF that series because I couldn't get a copy for the series. It was like continuing with the War Art Saga by Wesley Chu, and I was like, I don't want to do audio, and I'm actually like, I don't care enough, so I'll just DNF it. But for March, we are continuing on with the Murderbot Diaries, and I should be able to get the second book from my library. And yeah, so that is it for my wrap up. It was a very long video. I hope you still enjoyed it. If you have read any of the books that I talked about, leave your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media and also to my book club if you want to join the buddy read for Wom City. Those are linked down below, so go and check those out as well. And I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!